Hi guys, today I'm going to take you through the 2 to 4 player co-op game Pandemic, where you are playing as different roles such as scientists and medics and researchers and different things like that to try and cure these 4 diseases that have outbroke around the world. And if you get to cure those 4, you win the game. So the way the game works is we've got the board set up here. And each section of the country is split up into different colours. So we've got the yellow, the blue, the black and the red areas just here. We have what's called the player deck, which is where you are going to be drawing most of your cards. You've got the infection rate deck, which is going to determine where the disease spreads to in the world. You've got your player pieces here, which are currently in Atlanta, and you start off with 1 research centre. You've also got some cubes which are already placed onto the board during setup, and they represent the disease that are in these particular cities around the world. So the way we win the game is by collecting sets of the city cards here, which are drawn from the player deck. What you need to do is collect a set of 5 of the same colour cards, get to a research centre, and then you have cured that disease. When you've cured all 4 diseases, you win the game. However, there's only one way to win, but there's more than one way to lose. The first way is if any of these coloured cubes runs out and are on the board, that's one way. Another way is if you have 8 outbreaks in the game. I'll explain how they work in a little bit. And the last way is if the player deck runs out, that's another way that you can lose the game. And this is basically your timer for the game, so you can't take forever trying to save the world, unfortunately. So what are you going to do on your turn? What you're actually going to do is you're going to look on this list here and work down it. So the first thing when it comes to your turn is you're going to do 4 actions. You're then going to draw 2 player cards. Resolve any epidemics if you happen to draw one. I'll explain what those are in a little bit. If you ever have any more than 7 cards in your hand, I've got them face up in front of me here. If you ever have more than 7, you've got to discard down to 7 cards. And then what we do is we infect the cities, which is basically turning over these cards and adding coloured cubes to the board. So, first thing we're going to do is look through the actions you can do during the game. So there are 8 different actions you can choose from. However, you only get to do 4 of them. You can do all different actions, or you can do the same one over and over again. So the first 4 actions we're going to talk about are different ways you can move around the board. So the first one is drive or ferry. So each one of these costs 1 action, and driving or ferry is essentially just moving your player piece to any city that is connected to where you are by a line. So for example, that would be 1 action, 2 actions, 3 actions, 4 actions. Simple enough. The next thing we're going to do is a direct flight. So this is a way that you can move around the board a little bit faster. So what you're going to do is you're going to look at your hand of cards, and you can discard the card of the city you wanted to go to. So, for example, if I wanted to go to Mumbai, I have the Mumbai card here. So I put that in the discard pile, and then I can fly over to Mumbai. Just like that. Another thing you can do is a chartered flight. So a chartered flight is very similar to a direct flight, but it's kind of backwards. So what you do is you discard the card of the city that you're in. So I'm currently in Mumbai. I can discard Mumbai to go anywhere I like on the board. And then the last way to move about is by shuttle flights. So you've already got 1 research centre, which starts off in Atlanta to begin with. However, throughout the game, you're going to be building more research centres. And once they have been built, you are allowed to move between them. You're allowed to move between them for 1 action. And I'll explain how they get built now. So the next action you can do is build a research centre or a research station. So the way that works is you discard the card of the city that you're in to build a research centre there. So, for example, if I was in Mumbai, I would have to find a way to get there. I would then discard the Mumbai card. Then I can build a research centre there. So the other player can then, on their turn, go straight there using the shuttle flight action. The next thing you can do is treat a disease. So this is how you get rid of the cubes that are on the board, and I'll explain why they're a significant part of the game in a little bit. But this works slightly differently to whether the disease is cured or uncured. So let's just say we're in Montreal here, and we've got the blue disease, which is currently uncured. It is one action to remove one of the cubes. So if I wanted to remove all these cubes, it would cost me 3 actions to do so. However, if the disease has been cured, it's slightly easier to treat because we have the cure. So the way that works is it's one action to remove all the cubes from that location. So instead of only moving one, if the blue disease was cured, we can now remove all 3. However, it is something to bear in mind that even though the disease is cured, it can always come back out into the game. Unless, when the disease is cured, you get rid of all the cubes of that colour. So for example, if green went on to remove them from London and also Milan, that then becomes eradicated. And once it's eradicated, that essentially means that the disease can never come back. You've got rid of it. However, you don't need to eradicate every disease to win the game. You've only got to find the cures. However, if you manage to eradicate it, it just gives you a little bit of breathing space, so to speak, while you're playing the game. Now, where did these come from? I think it was Montreal, wasn't it? Yeah, cool. So the next thing you can do is share knowledge. And this is how you give cards to each other. And I'll explain why it's quite important on the next action, why you want to give cards to each other. But the way, this is probably the most finicky thing to do in the game, but you've got to do it really to a certain extent to win the game. So the way I do that is, let's just say, let's go back to Mumbai again. So if I wanted to give Mumbai to the other player here, what we have to do is both get to the city that we want to give away the card to, or take away the card of the player that has the card. So, for example, if I had Mumbai, we both need to go to Mumbai, and then I can give that Mumbai card away. Alternatively, if it was my turn and the other player had Mumbai, I could then on my turn take that card and add it to my hand. That's sharing knowledge. Really difficult to do because you automatically want to spread out around the board, but you have to come together to share that knowledge, and you can only swap the card of the city that you are in. And the last thing you can do is discover a cure, which is basically what we're trying to do to win the game. And the way you do that is by collecting a set of 5 of the same colour card. So, for example, something I prepared earlier. If we had a set of 5 blue cards here, I would then have to go to any research centre on the board. So even though Mumbai is in the area of the black cubes right here, I could still go there even though I've got blue cards. It doesn't matter which one you go to, just get to a research centre as quickly as you possibly can. So what I'm going to do is, now I've got my 5 blue cards, and I'm at a research centre, I'll discard those 5 cards, and then that disease is cured. Do that for all 4 colours, you've won the game. However, they're all the actions. Then what you have to do at the end of your turn is draw 2 of these player cards. So I'll draw 2, and most of the time they're going to be city cards like this. However, you do have some other cards in there as well. We have these event cards, which are, you can play them at any time, even though it's not your turn. And it doesn't cost you an action, and you just do exactly what it says on the card. So for example, this one would be move 1 pawn to any city, but obviously you have to get permission to do that before you do it. Otherwise you might have some angry helpers or co-players on your hands. So once you've drawn those 2 cards, you then resolve any epidemics. Again, I'll explain those in a second. And if I have more than 7 cards, I then discard down to 7 cards. I currently have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cards, so I don't need to discard down. Then what we're going to do is step 3, and that's infect the cities. So we're going to look at the infection deck, and we look at the infection rate. So the infection rate basically tells me how many cards I need to flip over from the infection deck. For every card we flip over, we add 1 cube to that city. So currently the infection rate is 2. So I would turn over 2 cards. First card being Chicago, so I'll take a blue cube and add that to Chicago, and I'm testing myself in my geography right now. And the next one is Washington, so that is going to be another cube there. So you keep going back and forth till either you win the game by finding all 4 cubes, or by unfortunately losing the game by running out of the player deck, running out of any of these cubes, or having 8 outbreaks. So it's probably a good time for me now to talk about how outbreaks work and what they are. So not only can you lose the game from running out of cubes, you can lose the game from having outbreaks. So the way this works is if the maximum amount of cubes of one colour a city can have is 3. So Montreal currently has 3 here. Now let's just pretend that, let me just find the Montreal card here. So let's just pretend that I turned over the Montreal card during the infect city step here. What you're going to do is add 1 cube to Montreal, but we can't because the maximum amount of cubes that we're allowed in Montreal is 3. So what happens then is an outbreak. So the first thing we do is move the outbreak marker down by 1. And then instead of adding 1 cube to Montreal, we're going to add 1 cube to every city that place is connected to. So we're going to add 1 to Chicago, 1 to Washington right here, and 1 to New York. So more cubes go out on the board. Now, let's rewind a little bit and just say that we already had 3 cubes in Washington and 3 cubes in Montreal. Now let's just pretend I just turned over Montreal, and I can't add a cube onto Montreal. So what I'm going to do is move the outbreak marker down by 1, add 1 cube to Chicago, 1 cube to New York City, and then 1 cube to Washington. However, because I've got already 3 cubes in Washington, another outbreak is going to occur. So I have to again move the outbreak marker down by another 1, add another cube to New York, add a cube to Miami, add a cube to Atlanta, but I will not add another one to Montreal, otherwise it will just keep triggering backs and forwards. So each outbreak can only be triggered once per turn per city. So, however, at the minute you're safe because in the infection deck, there is only 1 city represented by each card in this deck. Likewise with the player deck actually, there's only 1 card represented by each city. And so everything that has cubes out at the minute, well not at the minute, but let's just reset this a little bit. I can't remember what I had, let's just say, yeah, there we go. At the minute we're safe because every city that will have a cube on it is already in the discard pile. However, this is where these little bad boys come in, and that is the Epidemics. So in a normal game, what you're going to be doing is shuffling 4 of these into the deck, 1 into each quarter. And even though at the end of your go, what card you draw out is completely random, if you draw this card, it is your fault, okay, that this is happening. So when we draw the card, we resolve that epidemic straight away. So what we do is we follow exactly what is on the card. So the first thing we do is increase. So we're going to remove the infection rate marker up 1 space like that. So as more epidemics happen, you're going to be drawing more and more cards. However, so for example, you draw 2 cards, draw 2 cards, draw 2 cards, and then when we use this square here, or circle shall I say, you'll be drawing 3 cards. But right now, we just move it forward 1 space, so is a little bit closer to drawing more cards a little bit later on in the game. The next thing we're going to do is infect. So what this means is we take the infection deck and we're going to draw the bottom card of that deck, flip it over, put it into the discard pile, and then add 3 cubes to that city, not 1, we're going to add 3. So this one is Mexico City. Sorry, Mexico City, there we go. So there's going to be 3 cubes going onto there. And then the last thing we do is Intensify, which is arguably the worst thing. So what we're going to do is take all the cards that are in the discard pile of the infection deck, shuffle them up, and then we're going to add them back to the top of the infection deck. So basically what happens is every card that's just been drawn and infected, as the game goes on, gets infected again and again and again. So that's why it's really important to keep hold of and contain the diseases from spreading and getting those cubes off of the board, because it can get out of hand very, very quickly, which is why it's really important to stay at home right now and wash your hands. So that is pretty much the game of Pandemic. The only other thing I need to talk to you about are these roll cards. So you're going to be assigned a roll card at the start of the game, and this is going to basically allow you to break the rules in some way. So just as a couple of examples, the operations expert can build a research centre in the city that they're in without having to discard a city card. And the other one that I've got out here is the medic. So the medics can treat disease a lot easier. So what they can do is they're almost one step ahead of what everybody else can do. So when the disease is uncured, the medic can, for one action, remove all the cubes of that space. However, once that is cured, the medic doesn't even need to spend actions. They can just walk through and clear the disease cubes as they go. So if the yellow disease was cured right now, the medic could go 1 action, remove all the cubes for free, 2 actions, remove all the cubes for free, 3 actions, remove all the cubes for free, and then 4 actions, they could just start heading off. I'll leave all the other rules up to you to discover. However, if I've made any mistakes or there is anything you want to add, please feel free to add them in the comments below. However, for now, that is Pandemic, and I hope you enjoy the game.